After the release of Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Solid creator Hideo Kojima wanted to release a spin-off of the franchise featuring the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3. After a couple years of development, the game being scrapped and then revived with the help of another company, and the main character and overall gameplay of the game being completely changed and reworked, the game was finally released in 2013. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, one of the craziest yet most beautiful games I've ever played in my life. My first introduction to this game was back when I was a kid and played the Xbox 360 demo, and I loved it. You were playing as a cyborg, running around, cutting people in half and shit. And the cutting, bro, I probably spent like 10 minutes in the opening area just walking around cutting shit in pieces. But anyway, I played the demo, I liked it, and yeah, that was the end of that. I mean, I was a child with no money. I probably could have asked my mom to buy it for me, but I don't think that would have ended well, because, you know, look at it, look at the game. Anyway, fast forward a few years, I'm now old enough to have my own disposable income, and I decided to buy the game. And I fucking loved it. It was everything I remembered and more. It's been in my personal top 5 for like 3 years now, and unless a remake comes out, I can't see it leaving there. The combat was super fun with a lot of variety and without being overly complicated. And the story has that political shit that Metal Gear is known for, but it doesn't take itself too seriously. And the music? Oh my, don't get me started on the music, man. The music in this game is so damn good, bro. It's like the developers used Mozart's nuts and turned it into a DVD. Okay, as I was finishing that sentence, I realized how weird that sounded. But this game's music is really good, bro. I'm not lying. Every aspect of this game just comes together to make this extremely unique experience. Metal Gear Rising is a fantastic game and is one of Platinum Games' greatest accomplishments. But it also has a weird story that not many people know about. Like the fact that it wasn't actually meant to be developed by Platinum Games, or that the original version of the game was scrapped twice before it actually came out. And that's what this video is for. Today I'm going to tell you what this game is, how it came about, what makes it so special, and whether you should play it or not. So without further ado, let's get started. After Metal Gear Solid 4 was released, Hideo Kojima and the folks over at Kojima Productions were looking to make a spin-off title. This spin-off game was originally meant to feature the boss and the Cobra unit as main characters, but due to lack of experience from younger staff members and lack of involvement from Kojima himself, this project ended up being scrapped. After this, Metal Gear Rising would begin development, not to be mistaken with the game this video is about being Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Metal Gear Rising was going to be a side story about Raiden which chronicled the series of events that turned him into the cyborg and ninja badass he is in Metal Gear Solid 4. The game was officially announced at E3 2009 at the Microsoft press conference. And interestingly, the series' long-standing tagline of tactical espionage action had been changed to lightning bolt action. To be honest, this 40-second trailer didn't really show any gameplay or give any idea as to what sort of game it was going to be. But Kojima did describe it as a completely new Metal Gear experience, so I'm sure that this and the fact that it would be using a brand new game engine put some people onto the fact that this was going to be a completely different type of Metal Gear game. But they still didn't know what type of game it was going to be. But I mean, I'm sure people speculated on internet forums and shit, or like whatever people used back in 2009. It's fucking Stone Age, bro. Fast forward a year later at Microsoft's conference during E3 2010, the game's lead designer Maneshi Kimura, oh, I did not pronounce his name right, he unveiled a new Metal Gear Rising trailer which showed a lot more than last year's trailer. Alright, so there's this fucking cutscene of Raiden fucking up a robo-gorilla, which is cool and all, but I don't care about that. I don't care about the cutscenes because this year's trailer showed gameplay and a decent amount at that. It showed us some basic ground combat and would also give us a sneak peek at a cutting system which would end up being an extremely fun thing in the finished game. The combat in this trailer almost seems more fluid than the finished game's combat, and that isn't a bad thing, but it also seems slower in contrast to the finished game's combat. And I guess that doesn't really fit the title of lightning bolt action. You could call it more fucking, like, you know what I'm saying, lightning smooth action, because he's smooth with it, bro. Pop your shit, twin. I'm gonna remove that from the video. The cutting mechanics in this trailer seem almost identical to what would end up being in the finished game, apart from some tweaks to the UI and how it works. Kimura said that the game would carry on the tradition of encouraging players to not kill their enemies. But this is kind of weird considering the fact that this game has this whole new cutting system and you're playing as a samurai, but you're not meant to kill your enemies. I mean, what are you doing, man? You're putting us in a sand pit and expecting us not to play with sand, bro. Like, if you give me $20, I'm gonna take it. Wait, does that make sense? Kojima and co had ideas and stories that would make this work and they would create this mix of samurai action and stealth, but in the end it just didn't work out and the game would end up being cancelled in late 2010. And this is where Platinum Games comes in. Kojima met with Atsushi Inaba, a higher up at Platinum Games, and after a talk about the state of Metal Gear Rising, Kojima requested Platinum Games to work on the game. And thus, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance was born. Boom, that's like the big bang. of a game of Metal Gear Rising, boom. But the addition of Platinum Games would mean a few big differences in how this game would be developed. First of all, that whole stealth shit that they were trying to do, nigga, that's gone. That shit was gone. They decided to lean into the whole lightning bolt action thing and realized that sneaking around in cardboard boxes, that isn't really a lightning bolt action thing to do. Even though you can technically still do it in the game, but it's fucking useless, but we'll leave that for the gameplay section. Secondly, a rewrite of the game's script and a changing of where the original game would take place. The new plot was written in a way so that people who are new to the Metal Gear series wouldn't be confused, because as we all know, this series is convoluted as fuck. Also, human soldiers were removed from the game to deal with Japan's censorship laws. Japan back at it again, fucking us over with fucking cyborgs in games and blurred hentai. Gosh darn it, Japan. The last major change wasn't really a major change, but I think we can all agree that without Platinum Games' involvement, the combat in Metal Gear Rising Revengeance wouldn't be as good as it actually is. Like, no hate to Kojima and them, I played Metal Gear Solid 5, it was really fun, but like, let's be for fucking real, man. Platinum Games took this game's combat to the next level. Also, one last thing, and you know, I don't really know if this is true or not, but some sources, those being Wikipedia, say that the reason this game's name was changed to Metal Gear Rising Revengeance came from Kojima Productions' desire to get revenge on the original Metal Gear Rising project. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, then that's pretty cool. That's pretty fucking cool, bro. After a bunch of trailers, a couple interviews, and a demo that I played the fuck out of, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance was released for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in February 2013 and received pretty good reviews. And that's all the backstory you really need. I mean, there's some other stuff I could talk about, but I'm not going to. Like, you know, I could talk about how disappointed and annoyed people were with the fact that Revengeance wasn't a stealth game like the other titles in the franchise, but who really cares, bro? And also, technically I just talked about it. And who knows, I might just talk about certain aspects of its development and release later in the video. So without further ado, let's move on to the section that I've been looking forward to the most, the gameplay. The gameplay, arguably the best part of Metal Gear Rising. While the game is known for its batshit insane story moments and its incredible music, both of which are responsible for MGR's cultural resurgence, if you're playing MGR, it's because of the gameplay. So being developed by Platinum Games, I feel like it's in this interesting middle ground where it's not as complicated or complex as games like Devil May Cry, but its combat is still far more in-depth than your average hack and slash game, or character action game, or whatever you call these types of games. At its core, MGR's combat is pretty simple, at least when compared to other character action games, and I know that might seem like it contradicts what I just said, but it doesn't, and you'll understand what I mean later on. Raiden's moveset consists of light and heavy attacks you can do with your high frequency blade, and mixing these two together forms combos. You know what I'm talking about, shit like fucking 2 light attacks, 3 heavies, 1 heavy, 5 lights, you get the gist of it. In terms of pure offense, it's simple enough that a novice can pick it up and instantly feel goated with the sauce. Why did I put that in the script? Anybody can pick it up and have fun, but the people who aren't button mashers will realize something interesting. Each of these combinations of specific moves you can do are really useful in certain situations and against certain enemies. If you're not a gremlin that just smashes the X and Y button over and over again, you realize that rather than button mashing and losing half your health in the process, you can learn what each move does and deal with your enemies more efficiently. And while on the topic of health, let's talk about this game's parry system. In this game, you can parry by holding the light attack button when an enemy is about to attack you. One thing I love about the parrying in this game is that the enemies give clear signs and signals when they're about to attack, so if you miss the parry and get hit by it, like, you really just suck. I was recently playing Lies of P, which is a Souls-like and is fun as hell, but it's also very different to MGR, but regardless, it's hard as fuck to get parries in that game. Not just because the time frame to do it is incredibly small, but also because the enemies give no signal for when they're gonna attack, and it's a problem that I've noticed with lots of character action games. Devil May Cry 4. You really just never know when enemies are gonna attack. Like, there doesn't have to be a flashing notice on the screen that says, parry now, but just something small would help. But yeah, MGR doesn't have that problem. Apart from your high frequency blade, you can also replace your heavy attacks with a number of weapons you get throughout the game. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and some of them are kind of confusing, so I might as well just go through all of them. Also, I don't really know why I'm saying some of them, because there's only like fucking 5 of them in the game. Oh shit, wait, there's only 3 of them. Yeah, I should probably replay through this game before I finish this video. So all the unique weapons are given to you after beating a boss, and the first one is the polearm you get after beating the first boss in the game, Mistral. The second is the scythe that you get from the Monsoon boss fight, and the last ones are the pincer blades you get from Sundowner. Okay, look, I hate to say it, but these are pretty fucking useless. Well, it's not even that they're useless, but they aren't useful enough to replace my heavy attacks with the high frequency blade and all the combinations that come with it. Take the polearm, for example. It's great for dealing with large groups of enemies, especially those little bot fuckers that grab onto you, but I could also just use my high frequency blade and it wouldn't make much of a difference. The scythe. Now look, I didn't use these in any of my playthroughs. They were kind of confusing, but they're supposed to pull you towards your enemies and that's cool. but I can just walk, bro. Pincer blades are the most useful of the three in my opinion, because they're just these slow but extremely strong scissors that do lots of damage. But if push comes to shove, like, I really could just use my high frequency blade, bro. Like, let's be honest. And if I did use my HF blade, it wouldn't be that much harder than using the pincers. Like, the pros for the unique weapons just aren't outweighing the cons. My biggest complaint about these unique weapons is that they just aren't needed. Like, they're cool, and in my first playthrough of the game, I definitely enjoyed the feeling of getting new weapons and using them, but they just aren't as fun to use as the HF blade, which does everything they do and more. I feel like they were made for very specific situations, but the thing is, when I'm in those situations, I just use my HF blade. Like, I'm not gonna scroll through the menu just to switch to this polearm so I can beat up some robot babies easier. Like, that's just way too much effort for something that isn't that hard to do. Like it's not that deep. And while we're on the topic of scrolling through the menu, let's talk about the items in this game. And it might seem like those two don't correlate, but trust me, they do. So the items in this game, like the unique weapons, are for the most part pretty fucking useless. Anything that is not a healing item or like an energy replenishing item, you do not need. Like, the grenades and shit are cool when you don't feel like fighting, but I've never actually needed them. Like, I never have to ration them out. I almost always have a full stack of them. The only really useful items in this game, apart from the healing items, is the rocket launcher and the homing missile. Only because there's not really any other effective way to deal with the helicopters, unless you just want to jump in the air and tap the X button. For those wondering, the reason I keep saying X and Y instead of triangle and square or whatever is because I have an Xbox. Yeah, Xbox players still exist, buddy. The items are the exact same as the unique weapons. Like, I'm never going to be in the middle of a fight and be like, you know what would be perfect right now? A red phosphorus grenade, and just pause my whole flow of combat to scroll through the menu to equip my red phosphorus grenade. And like why would I ever do that? And that brings me to what I was referring to before I got started on this item rant. Why is there a whole ass menu just for me to change and equip weapons and items? Like, that is not necessary. MGR is an incredibly fast-paced game, but it requires me to just put all that to a stop to equip or use an item or weapon. Like, seriously? They couldn't have just mapped this to the D-pad? Because the D-pad is just there, bro. It's not doing anything. It's just gathering dust. Plus, it could have made the combat way better. Like, imagine if MGR was like Devil May Cry, where you could just cycle between weapons mid-fight or combo. That would add so much more variety to the combat and give the players a reason to actually use the unique items and weapons. I know it might seem like a small, insignificant thing to complain about, but like, just stop and think about it. Not only are they useless, but I also have to put in a lot of effort to use them. It makes no sense. At least if you could just cycle through and use them with the press of a button, I would probably just use them because it's easy and at my direct disposal, but I have to stop my whole flow of combat. My 360 mid-air backflip explosion ninja cyborg slice to equip a red phosphor. Like, bro, I'm not using that. I really hope this makes sense and doesn't seem like I'm just nitpicking. But hey, these are just some of the few problems in an otherwise fantastic game. And I also just realized that I'm not done talking about his combat, so let me just finish that real quick. So one of the main things that was shown a lot in trailers and talked about in interviews for the game was his cutting mode, or whatever the actual name for it is called. Blade mode? Yeah, blade mode. There was a lot of attention placed on that part of the combat. Gameplay trailers, there was a lot of footage of Raiden just slicing the fuck out of everything in this blade mode. Cyborgs, gorillas, watermelons. Whether intentionally or not, there ended up being a lot of excitement for this specific part of the combat, and developers did not disappoint. The blade mode is extremely satisfying, and I don't want to just glaze them and say that the way they integrated it into combat was genius, but they did do a pretty good job. Alright, so in regular combat, when you're just fighting a group of enemies, when you do enough damage to one of them, there will be this pause, or like, change in their movement. I don't know how to explain it, but once this comes up, you can enter blade mode and slice them into pieces. Like literal pieces. The game shows you how many slices you did and how many pieces you turned them into. And if you slice the enemies in this red box that shows up and press the button input, then you can like absorb their organs to regain health in this other blue meter thing, which is basically the meter for your blade mode. For larger enemies, when that signal shows up and you go into blade mode, it triggers like a special animation or sequence. Rather than just slicing them up, you start swinging around and doing ninja shit and then you slice them up and shit. It's pretty cool. When it comes to the bosses, bro, I feel like it's implemented perfectly. I don't want to reveal too much right now because I will be talking about the enemy design and the bosses in the game later on in the video, but the way blade mode is used in the boss fights is unique and very fun. And I guess the last part of Raiden's combat that I want to talk about is Jack the Ripper mode, which is different to blade mode because it's actually a transformation, or a power-up. He basically just goes Super Saiyan. It's basically this power-up you get around halfway through the game and it makes your attacks a lot stronger and a lot faster. But the thing is, when you have Ripper mode active, you're not actually going to be using blade mode. In my opinion, the coolest part about blade mode is slicing the enemies to pieces, but in Ripper mode, your normal attacks slice enemies to pieces. It's crazy and so much fun. You can only use it when your energy is full and it drains the bar pretty quickly, but for how fun it is and how useful it is, I'd say it's worth it. Apart from his combat abilities, he does have other shit like his ninja run, which is a sprint that automatically jumps over and slides under stuff that's in your way. He also has this like I forgot the name for it, but it's like a scan that highlights all the enemies, objectives, and items in the surrounding area. The upgrade system in this game is nothing special, but it gets the job done. While you're playing the game, you'll get these things called battle points. You get these from defeating enemies and finishing levels, but you get more of them based on how badass you are. Like how long your combos are, how many pieces you slice your enemies into in blade mode, how much damage you take, shit like that. Kind of like Devil May Cry with the red orbs and style ranking. After every combat sequence, you get a rating at the end, and you also get a rating at the end of each level, which decides how much BP you get. And if you go to the upgrade menu in between levels, or even during the levels, you can buy a whole bunch of different shit. You can buy different moves for Raiden's HF blades and unique weapons. You can buy different costumes that don't change your stats or have special effects, but they look cool. You can buy upgrades for Raiden, like increasing health or attack damage, and you can also buy different HF blades and wigs. Yes, you heard me correctly, there are different HF blades you can buy. You unlock these from a bunch of different places, like defeating bosses, collecting collectibles, and completing VR missions that I will talk about later on in the video. Oh, and DLC. You can buy DLC weapons and costumes, but if you do that, you're a loser, bro. I feel like I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The only way I can justify buying cosmetic items for single-player games like this is if it's like your life's work. If you spend like 100 hours in this game, then you're allowed to. If not, I don't know, bro. There's probably better ways to be spending that money, man. Apart from the HF blades, I also mentioned wigs, and there's 3 wigs in this game. Those being Infinity Wig A, Infinity Wig B, and Blade Mode Wig. I'm just going to keep it a beam with you guys. You're not going to get these during your first playthrough, because they all require you to collect a certain amount of officer hands and complete the game on either normal or hard mode. And just for you guys that didn't know, which is probably all of you, officer hands are just the hands of certain enemies in this game. It's like a rare Pokemon, except you cut their hands off. Wig A gives you infinite ammo for all your sub-weapons like grenades and rocket launchers, that shit. It's fun for 5 minutes, but you're never going to use it again after that. Wig B, on the other hand, is brilliance. It gives you infinite fuel cell energy, which by proxy also gives you infinite Ripper mode. Bro, I promise you, playing through this game with infinite Ripper mode was one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done in a game. And it was on hard mode as well. Bro, being able to just slice everything is so fun. Collecting those arms and finishing the game on hard mode was worth it, just for this wig. And as for the blade mode wig, I don't actually know, I didn't unlock it. Apparently it gives you the ability to slice through every enemy when you're in blade mode, which seems cool, but I've played enough of this game, I ain't doing all that for a wig. And since I'm already on the topic, I might as well just tell you about the collectibles in this game. Apart from the left arms you can collect after slicing certain enemies, there's a bunch of other collectibles you can get in this game. Using your scan ability, you notice there's a bunch of chests scattered throughout the levels, with each of them containing random shit. Whether it's a data core that upgrades your fuel energy or it's just some battle power, there's a fuck ton of shit to find if you look for it. And as a side note, it makes replays of this game a lot more fun, or at the very least just gives you something else to do. Apart from collectibles, there's also like these side missions you can do that just kind of pop up. And during my first playthrough, not only did I miss most of these collectibles, I also didn't do a single side mission. Things like this and the wigs make subsequent playthroughs of this game so much more enjoyable than they would be otherwise. And just in case you didn't know, MGR is a pretty short game. It's only like 7 hours long, so if you want to, you can bang this out in a day. So if you want to get your money's worth, you will be replaying this game. To be fair, there are 2 free DLC and the VR missions, which I will be talking about later, but the game is still pretty short regardless. Alright, now it's time to talk about the enemies and the bosses and level layout and shit. This is that real nerd stuff. There are a bunch of different enemy types that are introduced throughout the game. Some of them are fun to fight against and some of them are fucking stupid, but I'll just go through some of them so you can get a basic idea of what they're like. First off, you got your basic cyborg soldier enemies, and these are the most common enemies in the game. They're basically just cannon fodder. They're not hard to beat, but in groups, especially when you're focusing on other stronger enemies, they can get annoying. And there's a bunch of variations of the cyborg soldier. Like some of them use swords, some have riot shields, some even use guns, but the most annoying type is the one with the rocket launcher. Like bro, I swear, I'll be in the middle of piecing up a group of enemies, like just pulling off the most incredible combo you've ever seen, the most devious collection of moves you've ever witnessed, then this fucker will just hit me with a rocket and the rest of enemies will just start jumping me. Like seriously man, this RPG soldier needs to be in the dick-eating Hall of Fame, bro. There's also these big armored cyborg soldiers that do a lot more damage and need to destroy their armor before you can kill them. Now that the soldiers are out of the way, the next addition to the dick-eating Hall of Fame has got to be these things. These little arm robots are the most annoying enemies in the game. They just swarm you and start hopping on you, forcing you to like spin your left stick, and then you just get gangbanged by whatever enemy you were attacking before. These enemies are literally the only reason to use the pole arm because it's good at just destroying a bunch of them at once. But apart from that, nigga, fuck the pole arm. And fuck these little poop bots too. Actually, I take that back. I don't hate the pole arm, it's just useless. But still, fuck these robots. Apart from that, I'd say the most enjoyable enemies to fight in this game are the mech monsters, and there's two kinds of them. The dinosaur one and the flamethrower one. Now the reason I say these two enemies are the most satisfying to fight, or at the very least the most interesting, is because unlike most of the other enemies in the game, you can't fight them at your own pace. Like, let's look at the flamethrower mech for example. If you try to just rush in and start piecing it up with the light and heavy attacks, then you just get hit with his flamethrower, which is unblockable because, it's fire. You can't block fire, buddy. They force you to fight at their own pace, and in a game like Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, where the literal tagline of the game is lightning bolt action, this is a nice change of pace that helps switch up the flow of combat. And everything I said about the two mechs also applies to these gorilla enemies, except instead of shooting a flamethrower or kicking you, they just grab you and beat the fuck out of you. Oh, and there's also helicopters. Yeah, there is a nice variety of enemies in this game. A lot of the fun that comes from late game combat is a different mixture of enemies they throw at you and trying to approach them in different ways. In my opinion, the difference between good enemies and bad enemies is pretty simple. When you died, is it because you sucked, or is it because the enemies are horribly designed? In MGR, when I died, it was because I sucked. Except for those little shit boss, those were fucking horrible. But we all know, you can't talk about the enemies in MGR without talking about the bosses. And to put it bluntly, there are no bad boss fights in this game. While technically there are a bunch of weaker bosses and mini-bosses in this game, like the Metal Gear you fight in the tutorial and this sword dog that you fight, but if we're being honest, there's only like 5 real bosses in the game. Don't get me wrong, the mini-bosses that are scattered throughout the game are good and they were enjoyable to fight, but they just don't compare to the main 5. The 5 bosses in this game are fantastic and they're all unique as well. Like seriously, all 5 of them play out completely differently and require different skills and abilities for you to defeat them. The first real boss in the game, Mistral, is fun as fuck. She's this polearm wielding lady that has like Doc Ock arms that are made of the arms of those little shitbots, and it's just really fun. The fight has 3 phases that you go through that all take place in different areas, and the transition from one place to another is cool as shit. Like, it's the type of stuff that makes you want to watch the cutscenes and reminds you of how badass this game is. The fight also gets you used to using the blade mode mid-fight, and it does this quite well. It doesn't feel forced or anything, the way they implemented it into the fight just flows naturally. The second major boss fight of this game is Monsoon. He's completely different, but equally fun. Alright, well maybe not completely different, but he's still pretty unique. Like Mistral, he has multiple phases, but instead of it being like you transferring from area to area and Mistral changing up how she attacks you as the area changes, it's now just 3 or 4 phases that repeat and slowly get harder. Monsoon's whole gimmick is that his body is made out of like magnets, and he also kind of has telekinesis. Like just a little bit of telekinesis, not enough to hurt you. Nigga, is that a helicopter? Gameplay wise, this translates to the player trying to slash a nigga that can't be slashed and then him throwing helicopters at you. And all in all, this fight is pretty fun. I mean, this is probably the worst fight in the game, mainly because of the repetitiveness and how it does feel kind of boring when you're just attacking him and can't do damage, but it was still enjoyable, and it makes up for in the end when you run up some shit he throws at you and just slice the fuck out of him. The third boss in the game, Sundowner, is a massive upgrade from the Monsoon fight and is once again incredibly unique. The first phase, which makes up like 60% of the fight, is you having to block and parry Sundowner's attacks while trying to damage him and destroy his shield ram thing. The way you do this is by using blade mode, and once again, this is a brilliant implementation of blade mode into the combat. It feels natural and not forced at all. Blade mode forces you to be precise, and as the fight goes on, Sundowner starts doing things to switch up the flow of combat, like some unblockable attacks. The second phase begins after you destroy his shield ram thingy, and he just starts attacking you with his scissor blades. After you get his health low enough, he basically hits you with an Uno reverse and blows you off the platform, which starts his on-rails segment, and is cool as fuck. But in my opinion, it is nowhere near topping the beautiful, amazing, brilliant experience that is the next boss fight. Just Stream Sam, ooh yeah, I'm not gonna scream, but bro, you know I'm hyped for this guy. It's Just Stream Sam, bro. This dude, Just Stream Sam, is cool as hell, man. He's this Brazilian mercenary dude that's a samurai as well, and he's also the dude that fucked up Raiden in the beginning of the game. The boss fight with Sam is a rival fight. A fight with a character that has an extremely similar moveset to yourself and is grounded, unlike the rest of the fights that have had explosions and helicopters and moving places and shit. Just think Dante versus Vergil. I don't really know what else to say about this fight other than it's a cool duel with a cool dude. Also, if you haven't noticed by now, all the bosses are using the sub-weapons that you get after beating them, except for Sam. After you beat Sam, you get the Murasama blade, which does more damage than your standard HF blade and also looks cool as hell. As for the 5th and final boss fight in this game, yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. The only thing I will say is that it technically consists of 2 boss fights and that it's fucking fantastic. It has a funny reveal/twist at the end and is a perfect finale for a game like Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. I know the game has been out for like 10 years, but if you manage to go this long without knowing what it is, then I'm not going to be the person that spoils it for you. And I know that you're probably just going to roll your eyes and fucking just look up Metal Gear Rising Final Boss on YouTube, but instead of doing that, how about you just play the game, because It's really cool, bro. And now that I've talked about the enemies and bosses, the last thing I want to talk about in relation to the gameplay is its level design. Now, I guess a kind of rule that I've noticed for level design in action games like MGR is that it usually features at least 3 out of 6 of these types of areas and buildings in them. These areas are a city area, a snow area, a jungle/grasslands area, a sandy desert setting, a big castle or mansion area, and a mechanical lab/factory kind of area. Usually how it goes is that an action game has at least 3 of these and has some other unique areas to set itself apart, or just has some sort of special spin on the 6 areas that I've mentioned. MGR features 3 of these settings, with variations of the city and mechanical lab/factory areas making up a big part of the game. It also has a couple more like an airbase area, a sewer area, and a Japanese cherry blossom garden house thing area. The point I'm trying to make with this tangent is that MGR has a wide variety of settings. It changes the areas enough that you don't get bored of the scenery, but not too much that it just feels weird and like the developers just had ADHD or some shit. And also, side note, shout out to all my niggas with ADHD watching. I think I might have that shit, but it costs like a fucking €1,000 for a private psychiatrist session, so I think I'm just gonna stay undiagnosed. But yeah, even though MGR doesn't feature my 2 favorite areas, those being snow areas and castles, it still has a good variety of areas, and if you're like me and gets bored of being in the same place for a long time, MGR does not have that problem. Also, another side note, tangent, fun fact thing, Devil May Cry 4, which is one of my favorite games of all time, also has one of my favorite video game areas/levels of all time. It's this area called Fortuna Castle, which is this massive castle in this snowy area, and parts of the castle are frozen and shit, and bro, it's just so perfect. I'm also just now realizing that none of the shit that I just said actually has anything to do with level design, so now I'm going to talk about the game's level design. Shit, maybe I should get diagnosed for ADHD. Anyway, MGR features lots of open areas for combat and for you to explore and find collectibles and hidden items and shit, but it can also be quite linear at times. It kind of has this linearity in its openness, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I feel like the level layout of MGR hits the sweet spot right in the middle between linear and open level design. It's not too open to the point where you can just get lost and don't know where you are half the time, but it's not too linear that it just feels like you're walking in a straight line. Also, the enemy placement in this game is also very good. Some games kind of artificially inflate or like make the game feel like it's hard just by throwing a bunch of random enemies at you, but in MGR it feels like thought was put into how the enemies were placed. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. I don't really know what else to say about the level design of this game. It's good. It's good, and it works. And it's not bad. So yeah, it's pretty good. Level design in this game is lit. I guess the last thing to talk about, like the for real last gameplay thing to talk about, are the VR missions. VR missions are these challenges that you can do outside of the main story. They all take place in this yellow subspace area, and they're all timed, with there being first, second, and third place times. Some of these VR missions can only be unlocked by doing shit like collecting a certain number of collectibles or just certain collectibles. Getting first place in certain VR missions and a certain amount of VR missions, I'm saying certain a lot. Anyways, doing that rewards you with skins and high frequency blades. And VR missions in general just help add some extra content to what is otherwise a pretty short game. MGR's story, the thing we've all been waiting for, apart from the gameplay. MGR's story is probably one of the most interesting parts of this game, but it's also the part I have the least to say about. It keeps up the Metal Gear tradition of having a serious story with political themes, but also being goofy. And boy, this game is goofy. I feel like MGR takes the goofiness from other Metal Gear games and just turns it up to a 10. And I like that. I like the fact that even a stone-cold killer like Raiden can be made likable and relatable because of the dumb shit he does. And that brings me to the characters. And, yeah, they're alright. Like, don't get me wrong, the bosses are cool and shit, and like, this nigga Kevin was funny, but that doesn't change the fact that we don't get much time with any of these characters except for Raiden. Especially Raiden's allies. They're extremely underdeveloped. Apart from Raiden, they're probably the characters we spend the most time with, but they still come off as bland one-dimensional stereotypes. I mean, you got crazy German doctor guy, bombastic Russian guy, funny black guy, woman, like bro, they're all just outlines of characters without having an actual personality. When it comes to other characters like the bosses and other enemies, you don't get to know much about them either. They kind of like briefly explored the morality of artificial intelligence with the character Blade Wolf, and they also drew some comparisons between Raiden and Mistral because they were both child soldiers, but apart from that, there isn't much characterization in these characters. There is also this Mexican kid that Raiden saves. I think his name was like Jose or Jorge. If it isn't, then I sound very racist, but yeah, he was like an orphan or something. He was about to get his brain ripped out by some shit, and Raiden saved him, but he's also just a nobody. The characters in this game aren't that well explored. And you want to know what the funniest thing about it is? I don't really care. MGR's story feels like a side story, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Maybe it's because of the overall goofiness in this game, but MGR story-wise doesn't feel like a feature-length game, and there's nothing wrong with that. Disregarding the gameplay, the story and just the overall vibe of this game feels like a side story. It feels like they just took a character from Metal Gear Solid and put him on a wacky adventure with a robot dog and a loud Russian dude and like children having their brains stolen. It just doesn't feel like a proper standalone story. And once again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. MGR is a short game, and if they tried to give it some long, well thought out story, I'm pretty sure they would have failed given how short the game is. So I'm happy the story is what it is. And ultimately, the best part of the game is its gameplay, so even if the story was shit, it wouldn't change how good the game's combat is. For a game released in 2013, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance looks pretty fucking good. Like, I'm not saying it looks as good as modern character action games, but it doesn't look bad. Like, let's be for fucking real. It definitely aged better than a lot of the other games that came out in 2013. The only problem I really have with the graphics are the dark, muddy textures in certain areas. It's not glaringly bad, but like, it's not something I'm fond of looking at. But apart from that, the game looks good. I'm sure a remaster would make the game look a lot better, but it's not like it's in desperate need of one. The character models look great, and so do the areas in the game when the textures don't look like fucking mud. Another fantastic part of this game is its soundtrack. Jeez the fucking wheeze, man. This soundtrack is beautiful. Just listen to it, man. Are you listening? Tell me this music doesn't make you want to go slice people in half. I mean, don't do that. Don't do that, by the way. You shouldn't do that. But this music makes you feel like you should do that. If you go on YouTube and look up music from the game, you'll see tracks with millions of views, and it's for a reason. The music on its own is fantastic, especially when you're in the gym. I swear, bro, when I'm listening to this shit in the gym, it just gives me like a plus 10 attribute boost to everything. I'm gonna keep it a bean, bro. I've heard of people, like my friends have told me that they listen to anime soundtracks in the gym. That's pretty fucking corny. But video game soundtracks, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance soundtrack, that's valid. What was I saying? Yeah, the music in this game is good on its own, but when you pair it with the game's combat, it's insane. When you're in a boss fight and the music kicks in, oh man. Like the last boss, when the music kicks in for that one, oh my days, bro. No spoilers, but the music adds so much to the game and makes it way more enjoyable. At release, the game got pretty good reviews and it sold well, but it wasn't insanely popular. But nowadays, it is popular. Like very popular, to be honest. It's almost built up like this kind of weird internet subculture or like side fan base. I don't know how to explain it. And this is due to a bunch of reasons. The game's brilliant music, the fact that the game has aged perfectly gameplay wise, and the fact that the game is funny as fuck. The story, the characters, the dialogue, I don't know how it started, but there's just a bunch of just popular memes from the game. And it makes sense, bro. If you just play the game, like just play it, you will realize that a lot of this shit is very clippable. There's also that one meme, you know, you guys should know what I'm talking about. Standing here, I don't know, that song is just the meme. I don't know, man. If you know what I'm talking, do I sound like a boomer? I'm only 18, guys. I'm just barely an adult. This game is still very relevant. To this day, you'll find people posting memes about it and even playthroughs and video essays like the one you're watching right now. And that brings me to the last topic of this video. Will there ever be a sequel to Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance? Long story short, probably not. To be honest, I don't know if there'll ever even be another Metal Gear Solid game. Kojima parted ways with Konami a couple years ago, and I'm pretty sure Konami owns the right to the franchise. Considering the fact that Kojima was the main force behind the Metal Gear Solid franchise, I doubt there'll be another game anytime soon. And to be honest, I don't even know if Kojima wants to make another Metal Gear Solid game. I mean, fucking Death Stranding and all the other shit he's been working on since then. I mean, it's been successful, so who knows? But I don't really think this game needs a sequel. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is one of my favorite games of all time, and while a sequel would be cool, I'll be fine without one. If you haven't played this game, then do yourself a favor and go play it now. And that is my Metal Gear Solid Rising Solid Revengeance retrospective. I did not say this properly, but I'm not going to redo it because that's the end of this video. Yeah, this video technically took 3 months to make, but in reality, I was just busy with schoolwork, and since this is a pretty big... What am I saying? In reality, I was just busy with schoolwork, and since this is a pretty big project, I just kept postponing it. But I finally finished, and hopefully it does well. If this video doesn't get, like, at least, like, a bare minimum 1K views, I'm taking another 4-month break, bruh. Nah, I'm just playing, I won't, but I'll be really sad, and you'll probably hear me shitting about it in the next video. I'm not gonna stop and record it again because this is the end of the video and I'm allowed to waffle. But yeah, I didn't go over the 2 DLC for MGR, but if this video does well, then I'll eventually post a video reviewing those 2 DLC. But yeah, I don't think I'll post that video directly after this video because I'm kind of tired of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance stuff right now. Yeah, I think it'll be a long time before I post another big video like this, so enjoy it. This was such a pain in the ass to record, For reference, I usually record my videos standing up just cause, but this, like, I just had to pull out a chair because I couldn't stand up for all this shit, bro. I stutter a lot, so yeah, it just took a while to make. But actually, you know what I think about it, I didn't stutter that much making this video. And it's been 3 months since I recorded, so who knows? Maybe I just got better at speaking in the meantime. But yeah, I'm going to try uploading regularly again, so stay tuned, because for the 3 months I've been gone, I've had a lot of video ideas. Why did I say it like that? Apart from that, that's about it. Like and subscribe. Go watch my other retrospectives if you haven't, especially my Ashura's Wrath one, because that one flopped, but this one isn't going to. Hopefully. I hope so. Maybe. You'll be able to tell. I mean, you can tell. Look at the subscribers I have. Look at my likes. Look at the video views. Hey, comment down below, was this an L or a W? W or L? Ohio Skibbity, my brain is fried. Anyway, yeah, what was the old intro? Oh yeah. This has been Hugo Young, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.